Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. Okay, pay attention, everybody. Kevin Miller's cash code word of the day is plain. That's right, plain. Listen for your next cash code word during Sean Hannity at 3:06 today. But today's cash code word is plain. Go to KIDOTalkRadio.com for your chance to win up to $5,000. We go to Lars Larson joining us from the Lars Larson Show, nationally syndicated talk show host, man of the world. You can catch him on Fox News and just about everywhere else. Lars, good morning.
Good morning, and I live here in the Pacific Northwest, and I love the Northwest. Have you seen how testy Bill Clinton gets when he's asked about the scandal that caused his impeachment as president of the United States? He's out trying to hawk a book with James Patterson called "The President is Missing," and so he has to submit to interviews to push the book. Maybe he's just short of cash. I mean, he and Hillary are only worth a couple of $100 million, so he may need it to pay the rent. But boy, you start asking him about the Me Too movement, which I think would have treated Bill Clinton entirely differently than the Me Too movement, which is clearly aimed at Donald Trump, even though about 90% of those people who've been accused of the kinds of acts that would bring Me Too's attention, Kevin Spacey on young boys, Harvey Weinstein on young ladies, that Bill Clinton clearly was in that club. But when he's asked about it, all he does is bluster and say, "You're leaving out the facts." The fact is you were impeached for lying under oath to a federal judge, and you did everything you could to disparage and demean any woman who accused you. You know, you remember that James Carville once said that Paula Jones is the kind of woman you found if you dragged a $100 bill through a trailer park. This is the attitude that Bill Clinton and his defenders had toward women, and yet today he understands that he's in a political environment where he has to sound as though he thinks the Me Too movement is too long in coming. Yeah, except that I don't think they would have applied the rules to him. He was viewed as being above the rules, and so was his wife.
Lars Larson joining us. Kevin Miller here at KIDO Talk Radio, 580 AM, 107.5 FM. You know, I was surprised that Mo Rocca on CBS this morning did ask Bill Clinton about his impeachment, and the look on the former president's face, and then you could tell that they were prepared. They went to Senator Gillibrand and how she had said that Clinton should have recused himself from office, and how he handled that. It was fascinating, Lars, because usually in these interviews, as you pointed out, you never get to see them react in real time.
No, you don't. And there was an interview over the weekend with NBC in which they spent the first half of the interview talking about the book. And poor James Patterson. Although, if you decide to be in league with the devil, and have a book which is going to get extra attention on the bookshelves because it's authored by James Patterson, and Bill Clinton apparently had some contributions to it in one way or another. I don't know what it was, but I would imagine he might have thrown some ideas in. But I can't imagine Bill Clinton as a book author, but he knows that putting his name on a book will help sell more of them. And here's Patterson having to sit there and watch as his co-author gets grilled because his co-author's behavior toward women clearly put him right in the Harvey Weinstein camp. And then when he was finally asked, have you ever apologized to Monica Lewinsky? Well, I apologized to the whole world. That was his answer. I apologized. Have you ever called her up and said, "I'm sorry for what I did"? And his answer is no, he hasn't. Never has. 20 years, and he hasn't apologized to the young lady. And Monica Lewinsky has a slightly different take these days than she did at that time. And her take is, he was my boss, the most powerful man in the world, and I was in my first job out of college. So at the time, Kevin, and I don't know how much you remember this, but at the time, as a talk show host, I talked about this because I had always learned that if you have relationships between people in a working environment, whether the working environment is politics or business or whatever, if one person is very powerful and the other person is not, generally the man being in a powerful position, the woman being in a much lower position in the company or the endeavor, whatever it is, then you understand that he's obtaining sexual favors from the young lady because he can promise that she'll get better treatment as an employee, and that kind of relationship is inherently flawed. and that there's a power difference. All of a sudden, Bill Clinton comes along, and the Democrats and the liberals who had been pushing that line for the better part of a couple of decades had to suddenly reconfigure it and say, oh, no, it's okay for the most powerful man on planet Earth to obtain sexual favors from someone who's an unpaid intern, and that's okay. So they completely did a 180. Well, now, 20 years later, we've got the Me Too movement saying it's wrong for powerful men to go out and engage in sexual activity, consensual or not, with people who are, who are in a position to either be helped by them or to be hurt by them. And think how many Hollywood actresses we know of in particular who've said, if you crossed Harvey Weinstein, your career was over. And there were only a few who did, and their careers were demonstrably damaged. Well, that was the same situation with Clinton. And so what made it illegal? He wasn't impeached for lying about sex. He was impeached for lying under oath to a federal judge in a court case in which a woman who had been sexually harassed by him, dropping his trousers and telling him telling her to do what he had, what he was suggesting that she do. I don't want to say it on the radio, but when you have a situation like that and he lies under oath to a federal judge, that's wrong, and that's why he was impeached. A lot of people think he wasn't impeached. He was impeached, but the Senate did not convict him. Famously, and there were some people like Senator Ron Wyden, who's from the Northwest, who had a vote in that. And they ought to be ashamed of themselves. In fact, you notice the reporters don't ask them today. So, are you still proud of your vote not to convict Bill Clinton at the time? Nobody asks the question because most of the reporters like Democrats in office. I think the whole thing is just disgusting and kind of pathetic. And Bill Clinton, by the way, take a picture or take a look at what Bill Clinton looks like today, and then take a look at what Donald Trump looks like today, and understand these two men are the same age.
Lars Larson joining us here at KIDO Talk Radio. Catch him tonight at 6 after Sean Hannity. I go back to the Me Too movement. You go back to impeachment, and like I was working in Athens, Alabama at the time, and it always amazes me that the media gave them a pass. And you remember what Carville said? The bimbo eruptions. The bimbo eruptions. Can you imagine saying that today?
No, I can't. Although I'll bet it gets said in private. I'll bet there are politicians out there, and they probably aren't all Democrats. There are probably some Republicans as well who have their sexual peccadillos, and they have people around them who cover these things up. And why? Not because the men or women who cover it up want to, but because they realize that their careers are tied up in the success of this person, and that if the person gets run over by a bus, metaphorically, they get run over by the bus as well. And so you have an ugly situation that folks are forced to defend. And it's interesting, too, when they asked him about Barack Obama, he says he thinks Barack Obama got a pass. And why? Because he's the first African-American president. That's Bill Clinton's assessment. I would remind you that Bill Clinton, and he's quoted in a book as saying this to Ted Kennedy, the late Ted Kennedy, that, in talking about the candidate, Barack Obama, saying a few years ago this guy would have been bringing us drinks, meaning a few years ago this guy would have been a server, somebody who was a waiter.
I remember that, yeah.
And that was a racial comment, and today Bill Clinton claims that Barack Obama got a pass because he's black. And yet, do you hear any of the mainstream media describing William Jefferson Clinton as a racist bigot?
No, you don't, but it's tough for Clinton because he was so in tune with the African-American community. He was America's first black president, and then he was replaced by a guy that took it to his wife. It was her time. And, you can go back to the 2016 where he was sounding the alarm, and to be ignored by the Clinton folks. Hey, you're missing out on the working class people. There's probably a lot of frustration with him.
Oh, I'll bet there is. And when you say it was her time, I don't even think Bill Clinton believes it was her time. Bill Clinton must know in his heart of hearts, he'd never say it out loud, but he must know that Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate, that she didn't communicate with the people very well. She didn't communicate very well. And I think that most of us, and even if you weren't on the other side, the Republican side, the conservative side, you had to look at Hillary Clinton and think, she's up to something always. I mean, she and her husband were up to something with Whitewater. They were up to something with Travelgate. They were up to something with FBI Filegate, and they managed to skate past those. But we knew before she ever became Secretary of State and turned the State Department into an ATM that there was something really sleazy and tawdry about that whole operation, about she and her husband, and that she was in it to not just get power but get money as well. And he had to look at her, and I'm sure that at some level they probably do love each other, although they don't seem like a conventional married couple. They're political partners is what they are from a distance. That he had to look at her and say he has more campaigning ability and ability to connect with the people in his little finger than Hillary Clinton does in her whole psyche. And yet, if he had said to her, sweetie, you do not want to run for president. This is going to eat you alive, and you don't have what it takes to win. Can you imagine the famous rage of Hillary Clinton? There were at least a few lamps in the White House that got thrown at this guy, and I don't think he wanted any lamps thrown at him in private life.
Lars Larson joining us here, Lars Larson Show. Lars, we talked earlier this week about Roseanne, or last week about Roseanne. Samantha Bee hadn't broken yet. What do you make of Samantha Bee? And now apparently she's going to address this issue and the celebrity double standard when it comes to conservatives versus liberals. I know you've talked about it.
How is she going to address it? She used, Kevin, for all the language that you and I use, and we know the 7 dirty words you can ever say on radio. I learned them 43 years ago when I started in radio. There are 7 words. George Carlin does a very funny bit, but a very profane bit, about the words you can never say. One of them, I would argue, is the ugliest word in common English. It is uglier than any other word. It starts with C, and we know what it is. But for her to use that word to describe the president's daughter is just disgusting and beyond the pale. And I don't know how you ever explain that away. Do you?
No. But one thing, Lars, and again, you study people, you comment on people, you cover people, the reaction of Sally Field and other folks on Twitter and social media saying she didn't go far enough and all this. And again, this is the era.
You know that's ridiculous because unless you accept that there always will be a double standard, that if a Republican had used that word to describe, or a conservative had used that word to describe any woman, even a woman not nearly, because here's the thing, the president's daughter is a very nice person, right? I don't think anybody can really find, other than her politics and her connection to Donald Trump, you can't find anything really to say that's bad about her. She's a mother, she's a wife, she's Jewish, which a lot of the reporters are ignoring as well, because it would lead them to believe that there are people on the left who are disparaging somebody as a woman by saying this ugly term, this ugly slur, and they would never let a conservative get away with it. If anybody on the right had used a term like that to describe a woman, I've never in my life used that term to describe a woman. And yet the standard is a double standard. It says you can do it if you're a liberal, and your friends in the media will give you a pass on that. And it's absurd.
Lars Larson joining us now. Lars, finally, the story going on today is the president can pardon himself. He's more powerful than anyone else. The crazy media narrative.
Yeah, I got to tell you something. I think this is funny because the president knows that technically he can pardon himself. Technically, there are probably a lot of things that the mayor of Boise could do or the police chief could do that you would never do, but technically, legally, you could do it. So the president, I think, knows that throwing this stuff out is like red meat for all these crazy people at CNN and MSNBC, and that sending it out there it's like when I take our 2 dogs out in the yard. If I throw a ball, they will chase it. And there's just it doesn't matter. The ball could be the dirtiest, ugliest ball you've ever seen. You throw it out in the yard, they will chase it. He understands the media will do this. And they're all chasing their tails on this thing, saying, well, he could pardon himself, but he's not going to. Rudy Giuliani says he's not going to. Chris Christie acknowledges he's not going to. The president knows he's not going to. He's not going to have to because he hasn't done anything wrong. But now the media is chasing his tail on this one, too, and I find it actually kind of funny.
It is crazy. Lars, what should we be looking out for this week on your show?
Oh, watch out. There have already been a couple of I just saw, and I was trying to look it up as you and I were talking, so I'm multitasking. I believe there may have been a decision now in the Masterpiece Cake Shop. This is the one involving so-called LGBT rights. Again, to be treated differently than everyone else. But let's see. The Supreme Court ruled for the Colorado baker, who said, I will not make a same-sex wedding cake. This is the correct ruling. This, right now, Kevin, in your audience, I know you probably have some lovely liberal progressives in your audience. They should drive to the side of the road, put on their four-way signals, and just sit there for a second, because otherwise they may get hurt. This is going to drive the liberals absolutely nuts. They have ruled in favor of the baker, meaning that when somebody walks into a cake shop, and there's a case like this right here in the Northwest, the one they were ruling on comes out of Colorado, but this one in the Northwest the question is, if you would wait on and sell products to gay people, and you treat people equitably, but then someone comes into your shop, and let's say you have firmly held religious beliefs, that you believe that same-sex marriage is wrong. And do you have the right to say, I will not create a special cake to celebrate your marriage that I fundamentally disagree with? And the Supreme Court just ruled in favor of the baker. And I think this is a tremendous blow for freedom, because as much as gay couples under the Supreme Court have the right to get married, I don't know that Supreme Court ruling was correct. In fact, I think it was wrong, because I don't find marriage anywhere in the Constitution. But the Supreme Court has already ruled. But by the same token that two gay people have a right to get married under the law because the Supreme Court decided they do, the baker has the right to say, I choose not to participate in your wedding, your marriage. And this has been the Tri-Cities in Washington State have a local florist who had customers who were gay, but she said, I don't want to be involved in your gay wedding. And I think there's a difference between saying I will wait on customers who are men, who are women, who are black, who are white, who are gay, who are straight. That's one thing. But when somebody comes to you and says, will you make something special, a special creation to celebrate this wedding, this marriage, and you say, I prefer not to, it violates my religious beliefs. In the same way that if a local, I don't know if there's a local Muslim catering company or Muslim-owned catering company in Boise, but if they said, we cater events, and you said, great, cater our event and bring lots of beer and wine for our event. If the Muslim-owned catering company said, no, we choose not to, it would violate our religious beliefs. You say, oh, so you're discriminating against me because my event is a wedding, and I want you to come cater it, and you won't cater it because of your religious beliefs? Well, then we're going to take you to court. And there have been people who have been tremendously punished because of this. And, there's the cake shop, Sweet Cakes by Melissa, which is 20 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And the cake shop is no longer in business, driven out of business, because they refused to make a gay wedding cake at a time when gay marriage was illegal in the state of Oregon. They said no, but they said no politely. And they have been fined $150,000. They've been driven out of business. They've been made into social pariahs. It's outrageous.
Lars Larson, we will catch you tonight. We always appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, Kevin.
All right, our great friend Lars Larson, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Hey. Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here. Don't forget to listen this afternoon, Sean Hannity 306 for your next Win Kevin Miller's Cash code word of the day. Listen at 605, 805, and 305 for your chance to win up to $5,000. Traffic and weather together at KIDO. And coming up next, President Trump's weekend in review. We go from your house to the White House exclusively with me, Kevin Miller, on 580 AM, 107.5 FM. Good morning, Maggie.
A lot of women to speak out. One of those women, Monica Lewinsky, she wrote in an op-ed that the Me Too movement changed her view of sexual harassment. Quote, "He was my boss. He was the most powerful man on the planet. He was 27 years my senior with enough life experience to know better. He was at the time at the pinnacle of his career while I was in my first job out of college." Looking back on what happened then, through the lens of Me Too now, do you think differently or feel more responsibility?
No, I felt terrible then. And I came to grips with it.
Did you ever apologize to him?
Yes, and nobody believes that I got out of that for free. I left the White House $16 million in debt. But you typically...
No, this is just like Lars Larson was saying. Good morning, Kevin Miller with you, KIDO Talk Radio. I love Clinton. He thought he was going to be promoting his book, pimping his book, and then all of a sudden they get him with Monica Lewinsky, and very, very uncomfortable. Coming up, we'll talk about that. Also, as you heard from Lars Larson, breaking news that the Supreme Court has backed the baker. That's right. The Supreme Court has ruled for the Colorado baker in the same-sex wedding case. We'll hear the arguments before the Supreme Court. By the way, that ruling was 6-2. The Supreme Court ruled narrowly in favor of the Colorado baker who refused to bake a cake celebrating the same-sex couple because of religious objections. That is 6-2, the ruling. We'll talk a little bit about that. Joining us now is John Decker from the Washington, D.C., from literally the White House. John, good morning on Fox News Radio.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing today, Kevin?
I don't know how you do it. Saturday, I'm just sitting there hanging out, and the president just kept tweeting and tweeting and tweeting. And even this morning, I'm going, okay, I get it.
Yeah, the latest tweet coming from the president, one in which he writes, the appointment of the special counsel is totally unconstitutional. Now, as you know, Kevin, as your listening audience knows as well, the president's legal team has not actually ever challenged the constitutionality of the appointment of Robert Mueller as special counsel, and he was named to that position over a year ago. So this is the first that I'm actually hearing of this.
Well, and, you know, we can ask your opinion as an attorney, as a reporter, as a historian, as a professor. What do you make of the argument?
I don't think it's a good argument. I think that's the reason why his legal team has not made that argument. It was constitutional. It's on the books in terms of the availability of this option to name a special counsel, which is what was done when the president's attorney general recused himself from the Russia investigation. And that's when, of course, Rod Rosenstein stepped in, who was essentially the deputy attorney general, stepped in and named Robert Mueller as the individual to oversee that investigation. So unless the president's legal team wants to follow up with that tweet and file legal papers with the appropriate federal court, I just don't think that that's a good argument to make. There are other arguments that they can make in terms of the investigation, but that's not, I believe, one of them.
Well, here's the other one. It seems, if you caught any of Rudy Giuliani's appearances on Meet the Press or ABC, it was almost like they were saying to the special prosecutor, "You're not the boss of us."
Well, that's right. They were saying that because they were saying the special counsel does not have the authority to subpoena a sitting president. That's one thing that the president's legal team has said. The president also earlier tweeting today that he has the absolute right to pardon himself if he chooses to do so. That's something that has never been taken up by the federal court system. So if the president decides to do that, that would certainly be challenged in the federal court system, number one. And even as Rudy Giuliani has pointed out, if the president were to do that, that would certainly invite impeachment against the president. But the president also indicating in a tweet that he is not going to go down that route. He's not going to pardon himself.
Yeah, and that has been one of the lead stories today. The president is this, the president is that. I'm sure people will be talking about that perhaps the next time you have a White House press briefing.
Well, that's right. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, I think we only had one White House press briefing last week. It was last Wednesday. Is that right? Is that right by your count?
Yes, sir.
Yep. And so there is one scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon with Sarah Sanders, and I'll be there. And I think a lot of these issues may indeed come out during the press briefing, including, asking Sarah Sanders, what does the president mean by this particular tweet, and is this something that the president's legal team will follow up on by filing, legal arguments to that extent, claiming that the special counsel or special counsel law is unconstitutional.
And finally, just because sports is the great unifier, John.
Yeah, right, it is.
What do you make of Serena being out with that pec injury?
I'm very fortunate. I saw Serena play 3 times over the course of the past week. I didn't know if you don't. I don't know if you know. I was away. I was in Paris for the French Open, so I saw Serena play, and I think she looked great. Her movement was great. Considering this is her first Grand Slam after giving birth to a baby girl, I believe in September of last year. So I was surprised by this, and it was a gift to Maria Sharapova, because I don't know if you know this, Kevin, the record, the one-loss record in head-to-head matchups between Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova is 19-2. So of the 21 matches they've played against one another, Serena has won 19 of them. So she really has her number. So it's a gift, this decision by Serena Williams to pull out of the French Open today.
Physically, when you watch her in person, many people, when they go to a football game, NFL or NBA, they just are amazed by the rawness of these athletes. What is she like watching her play?
Well, I don't think there's anybody that can compare to her in terms of her physical strength, her movement. I think that she, without a doubt, is the greatest female player of all time. And Roger Federer himself has said, she may be the greatest player of all time. So she's pretty remarkable when she decides to step away from playing. I think she's got some pretty big shoes to fill, and I think the quality on the women's side will go down without her, out there competing for Grand Slams.
Just an incredible run of dominance by her.
Yeah, it really is. It's pretty remarkable, and let's hope that this injury can fix itself by the time Wimbledon comes up, which is in about a month's time, and then certainly for the U.S. Open, which happens the end of the summer, pretty much at the end of August. So let's hope she recovers. Rafa Nadal still in the tournament. He's made it to the quarterfinals, and I think that he certainly is the favorite on the men's side. On the women's side, I think Maria Sharapova is now, if she wasn't already, I think she's the favorite to win the whole tournament.
John Decker, we appreciate you. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kevin. Thanks for asking me some tennis questions, too. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Have a good day, okay?
You too, sir. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
From the White House to your house, KIDO Talk Radio, 580 AM, 107.5 FM. Tea Party Bob joins us now, fresh off his excursion to the bodybuilding show this weekend.
Oh, what a show it was. What a show it was. I can only remember the picture of Kevin Miller when he was that great and fabulous bodybuilder. When are you going back?
Many years ago. I'm working on a special project right now.
Well, I'm waiting, we got to take some pictures. We'll put you right up there in headlines on the Gem State. What do you think?
Well, look, if I could make the headline of the Gem State Patriot, that would be a remarkable accomplishment for me.
Well, you've been there before, so we'll see what happens.
Again, what can we do for you today, sir? By the way, for people that weren't there, Tea Party Bob and I attended the bodybuilding show at the Revolution, and you were quite smitten with the young and not so young ladies.
Hey, that's what old guys do. Isn't that right? That's what they tell me anyway. I'm trying to be an old guy. I just have I have a few comments about the housing prices. I've been thinking about selling my house, so I've been doing a little checking in the market. While the housing prices are high right now, they're no worse than they were in 2007. People seem to forget what they were paying 10 years ago. What's happening is the cost to build a home has increased substantially, and I'm being told by realtors and builders that the cost is around $220 a square foot to build a new house, which is absolutely ludicrous. I've got a friend who lives 30 miles outside the city, and he wants to buy the home he's been renting, but the appraised value is $200,000, and the owner says it's worth $300 because that's what it costs to build a new one. So I think things are getting a little wacky, but it's all part and parcel of a recovering economy in a fast-growing state like Idaho. There's a shortage of homes under $300,000 right now, but that's going to correct itself in time. And, if you're looking for a perfect home, don't be in such a rush. Be patient, because what goes up must come down. And just to reiterate what I said last week, we do need a Prop 13 here in Idaho to stop the continued growth of government spending and put a cap on the property taxes that can be charged, in particularly to the elderly. What we need is a ballot referendum to not only slow the growth of taxes, but to tie it to the county budget so that they can't spend more than they take in. And we need to get rid of that clawback tax, because that's a disaster waiting to happen. As far as the Trump impeachment, I hope they keep talking about it, because it's just going to get more supporters out at the polls in November, and we'll get more Republicans in, and hopefully we can get a strong majorities in both the House and Senate and fix the rest of the problems the Obamas created. And just one more thing. Congratulations to the baker who won the lawsuit on a same-sex cake, because it's a long overdue decision and a real win for religious liberty and rights. So, Mr. Miller, until the next bodybuilding show, let's get out there and do some walking.
Doing something, yes.
I love you, brother. You take care. Great show again today.
We love you, Tea Party Bob. Take care.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And coming up next, we will talk about this historic ruling from the Supreme Court, considering that a baker can deny a couple services based on his religious beliefs. Details next. The Supreme Court just ruled with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Peace Cake Shop case. And this was the case, of course, where that baker refused to bake a custom cake for a same-sex couple, saying that it violated his freedom of religion as well as his free speech. Well, we're just getting the opinion from the court now, and it appears that the court here has upheld the baker's right to refuse to make that custom cake for that same-sex couple. Now, again, this opinion has just come down, so our crew is parsing through all of the language here, but this is an opinion that has been written by Justice Anthony Kennedy. And, of course, you'll remember that Justice Kennedy was also the justice that drafted the majority opinion in Obergefell, which granted same-sex couples the right to marry nationwide. So, going back to some of the facts of this case, this was a case out of Colorado where a same-sex couple wanted to get married. They went to a local bake shop, and they asked this cake maker to specifically make a custom cake for their wedding. Well, the baker said it would violate my religious beliefs if I were to use my skills as a baker to make this custom cake for you, and I refused. So this went through the lower court process. It also went through the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, and it determined whether or not this was discriminatory, and this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the question here is, can you violate some of these anti-discrimination laws at the state level purely because of your religious beliefs? And while we are still going through some of the language here to see how narrowly this decision came down, it appears that by this ruling, yes, in fact, if you are someone like this Colorado cake maker, you can refuse to make a cake, to use your artistic abilities and your skills to facilitate a same-sex couple's request.
There we have it from CNN. Kevin Miller here at KIDO Talk Radio. So the ruling was 7-2. If you're just waking up with us, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of a Colorado baker who said, nope, I'm not baking a cake to celebrate the same-sex couple because it was against his religion. The ruling, not narrow at all, 7-2. When's the last time the Supreme Court has ruled something 7-2? The court held that imagine this, that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission showed hostility towards the baker based on his religious beliefs. That's right. They showed hostility towards the baker because of his religion. Now, the ruling is a win for baker Jack Phillips, but leaves unsettled the broader constitutional question of the case. Of course, typical Supreme Court. But as Lars Larson was talking about earlier, and we've talked about endlessly, you've got the folks in Oregon that have been going through the same thing, that were driven into bankruptcy because of this. Because they decided that their religion and their religious beliefs were more important than profit, more important than being politically correct. Now, Kennedy, who wrote it, it's not wide-ranging. It is tailored to the case at hand. But remember, it goes back to this. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission, you remember, openness, tolerance, peace, love, and understanding, showed animus towards Jack Phillips because he said, look, this is against my religion. How dare you, Mr. Phillips, have any type of religious objections to making this cake? A victory for America, a victory for people of faith. Now, again, people say they were really hoping that this would be broader, and we'll see how it goes. Remember, it was just 2 years ago where they legalized same-sex marriage. We'll take your thoughts on this at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. It's really what we've been arguing for years, that if you have a religious objection, can you be compelled by the state to do something against your religion? And going back to what Lars Larson said, I mean, if you have a Muslim caterer and they say bring in the booze and they're not down with it, they shouldn't have to bring in the booze. It's a free market. You could get somebody else. I don't know why, when it comes to this type of industry, that it was such a cultural flashpoint. Okay, there are maybe hundreds of bakers in the Treasure Valley. And we're not even talking about the Treasure Valley. We're talking about in Colorado. Plenty of people that take photos of weddings. Plenty of people that take photos and flowers and catering and everything else when it comes to, but specifically, this seemed to be a flashpoint for so many people that it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And look at Mr. Phillips. I don't know who paid for his legal fees. I hope that somebody took care of that. But just as you have to respect the Supreme Court, when there's a decision, thank you, Justice Roberts, that we don't agree with, the left has to respect this decision if they don't agree with it, right? At 580-5436, 580-KIDO, they should respect this decision. The law is the law is the law. And of people of faith, maybe this stops the era of persecution, right? The era of being persecuted because you're a person of faith.
Very narrow opinion. Supreme Court ruling that in this case, this Colorado baker was not given a fair shot by a human rights commission in the state.
You imagine that? The baker wasn't given a fair shot by the Human Rights Commission. Now, again, I think that the human rights, aren't they about tolerance and diversity and understanding and all these other things, right?
The conclusion is that the baker was entitled to a neutral decision maker who would give full and fair consideration to his religious objections as he sought to assert it. In this case, that was not done. However, later cases, this ruling says, must still await disputes in court moving forward without undue respect to sincere religious beliefs and without subjecting gay persons to indignities when they seek goods and services in an open market. So the Supreme Court narrowly ruling for a Colorado baker who would not make a same-sex wedding cake, but holds off on applying a larger precedent-setting opinion.
There we call it the punt at SCOTUS. On the other hand, a victory 7-2. By the way, that's our own Jared Halpern at KIDO Talk Radio, 580 AM, 107.5 FM. But again, your thoughts. That's next. First, traffic and weather. Oh, Larry, thank you very much. Of course, the weather continues to heat up as we get ready for the longest day of the year, June 21st. And then it'll start getting cooler again, start getting more and more dark. We've had a good run of the endless days. Joby in Meridian returns with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio.
Top of the morning, Kevin, and good morning, Idaho. Long time no here, and glad to be back in the Treasure Valley. Mr. Phillips, so I saw a little documentary on him, and it is unbelievably amazing that this gentleman had to go through this persecution. I'm not sure if folks are familiar. So he stopped making wedding cakes, which was the largest part of his business. And so he totally stopped making wedding cakes because obviously he couldn't do that with the court case going on. So he sold donuts and pies and some other things and was just barely eking by. His daughter worked with him. Some folks helped and volunteered, but it was a great victory for him. It is a great victory for folks of faith to have their rights there. And then I'm going to leave a little teaser because I will call back tomorrow morning. The intolerance and the injustice and the not being accepting is a big reason that folks are coming to the Treasure Valley. I'm going to leave it there, and I will call back tomorrow.
All right, Joby, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And as always, God bless. Have a great day, and bye-bye.
Hank, you'll bring us home. Good morning.
Okay. I'd say that I think a broader opinion. I think that Baker has a right, no matter what his opinion is, to serve or not serve. I think that's a basic freedom, and you don't necessarily have to have a religious reason to do so. I mean, who he chooses to cater to and do it should be a constitutional right. I think the decisions are a step in the right direction. The surprise is Kennedy, because Kennedy's been the spearhead of gay marriage and whatnot. And I'm also surprised that the full liberal contingent of Kagan and Sotomayor and Breyer and the other woman, just the tip of my tongue right now, the three, that they only mustered 2 of those votes in there. That's the other surprise about this decision.
7-2, Hank.
Yeah, that is a surprise. I'll have to look it up.
All right, Hank, God bless. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, Fox News next.